This is the lecture on the topic of what is management. This is a very basic lecture in the series. We're going to explore in this lecture the very basis of management. We all use that word a lot. Probably we are all managers in one way or another in our daily lives, whether it's at work or not. But this is just to get us started and to help us understand the concept of management, as it'll form the basis for most of what we do from here on out. So let's get to it. Okay, let's ask this question first. What are managers? Okay. What does management do? This is a question that we've been asked for many years. It's not a new question. Many scholars have studied this concept of what is management. We've been trying to answer this question for hundreds and hundreds of years. As I said, we all do it at various different levels in our lives, but it's a very difficult concept to understand. It's a role, it's a set of behaviors, and it has some outcomes to it. But I think one of the simplest ways to define management is to use that very simplistic definition at the top of the slide. Managers are people who get things done through other people. And that forms a whole basis for looking at human capital management. What do managers do? Well, at a very rudimentary level, they make decisions, they allocate resources in the organization, and certainly, as the definition implies, they direct the activities of others to attain goals. I used the word organization a moment ago, and I want to sort of define that too before we go further. To me, an organization is a consciously coordinated social unit composed of two or more people that function on a relatively continuous basis. So it's a day-to-day association, not just a one-time brief association. They function on a relatively continued basis to achieve a common goal or set of goals. Two or more, continuous basis with a goal. That makes an organization. And that's where management happens. Management happens inside of organizations. Traditionally, we've looked at what management does. And the literature tells us very clearly that there are at least four significant functions that managers engage in. They plan for implementation of strategy, for utilization of resources, for scheduling and so on and so forth of labor, all kinds of things that we do to plan. We organize. We take disparate information and put it together and try to come to a conclusion that allows us to make good decisions. We control as managers. And what we mean by that is that we direct the activities in such a way as to hopefully achieve the desired outcomes. And finally, we lead, and this is really where the management of people comes in. This is where getting things done through other people really comes to roost. Okay? This is where we get the activities that have to do with managing human capital more so than the other three. There have been a lot of arguments in the literature about the differences that exist between leadership and management and the question of whether they're the same thing. For purposes of our definition, at least, we're going to conclude that they are all the same thing. That leadership is part of the managerial function. Okay, let's look at these in a little more detail. Planning. This is a process that managers go through that includes defining goals and establishing strategy, coordinating activities. Okay? And as managers advance in organizations, as they go higher and higher in the organization, they tend to do this more often. Planning is done more by higher level managers than by lower level managers. Lower level managers tend to engage in the other functions more than upper level management. But all managers do plan. Okay? Organizing. Here we determine what tasks are to be done, who's to do them, how the tasks are to be grouped, okay? Who reports to whom, and where decisions are to be made. Now, again, almost all managers do this, no matter what level they're at in the organization. Control, this is simply monitoring performance and comparing it to what we expect. Okay? And this is very critical to being an effective manager. Knowing what should happen, knowing what we expect to happen if we engage resources, if we put forth money and time and effort and human capital, and then looking to see how well we're doing it. There's a lot of management practices in the marketplace today that are being used to do just this. If your company is doing Six Sigma, this is a good example of a control mechanism, trying to be sure that to the greatest extent possible we're accomplishing what we set out to accomplish and utilizing resources in an efficient way. The fourth, as I told you before, function of management is leadership. Okay, and it includes motivating employees, which we're going to discuss in some detail in the next couple of modules. It involves selecting effective communication channels so people understand what's happening and why they're doing what they're being asked to do. And it certainly involves resolving conflicts, because in all organizations there are scarce resources, and where there are scarce resources there are conflicts. And good managers lead by resolving conflicts amongst the subordinates that they have over the allocation of those scarce resources. So bottom line is this: management is all about people. And if we want to manage well, we have to understand how to manage people. And of course, all of those functions happen simultaneously. You can't do one without the other. There's a lot of overlap. Henry Mintzberg, a very famous writer in the management field, has done a lot of work early in his career with trying to distinguish what managers actually do. And he was able to study managers in depth and came up with a classification of managerial tasks. And he said managers tend to do three different things. They tend to take different roles or behavioral sets. One is interpersonal. Okay. Two is informational. And three is decisional. So now we have a second model of what managers do. They have interpersonal requirements that require them to deal with people, informational requirements that have to do with providing information and communication to one another, and decisional roles which have to do with choosing among alternatives for which the unit or the business or whatever they're managing can do. Which direction should we go? Which options should we take? When should we do it? How should we do it? Who should do it? Those are all decisional roles. And we're going to study decision making in a little more depth later on also. A third approach to looking at management duties, or the typical roles of management, was done by Katz. Okay, and a social psychologist. Katz also studied managers, and he came up with this model. He said that there are some essential managerial skill sets that we have to look at. Every manager has to have a degree of each of these skill sets. They have to have technical skills, which is the ability to apply specialized knowledge. Okay? This is knowing what to do and when to do it, why it works. Okay? They have to have human skills, which is the ability to work with and understand and motivate people, very close to leadership. Okay? But this means that we have to have those skills in both the conjunction with individuals and with groups or teams in organizations. And the third skill set that Katz discovered that managers engage is conceptual. Here he's talking about the mental ability to analyze and diagnose complex situations. This is actually one of the basic skill sets that we aim at for MBA students. This is where we'd like you to develop your skills. Okay? Three skill sets: technical, human, and conceptual. Okay? What I find fascinating about those three skill sets is this. As one moves from a supervisory position into middle management and top management, the skill set mix changes a bit. At the lower levels, there is a bigger reliance on technical skills and a smaller reliance on conceptual skills. At the higher levels of management, it reverses. There's more of a demand for conceptual skills and less of a demand for technical skills. But what's critical here is to realize that the degree or the amount of human skills that are required to be an effective manager remain consistent along the entire managerial continuum from supervision to top management. And that's why human capital management is so critically important to being an effective manager or an effective supervisor or executive. That these skills remain consistently important regardless of the level of position you have in an organization. Okay, let's look at one more. And this is a study done by Fred Luthans, where he again looked at what managers do. He studied their activities over a long period of time and came up with this model or this classification of managerial activity. And the important thing that differentiates Luthans from the ones we looked at earlier is he actually classified managers as either being successful or effective. And then he looked at how each of these four types of activities are engaged in by successful and effective managers. And those four types of activities, first of all, are the traditional management things that we talked about at the very beginning of this lecture. Okay, planning, controlling, and decision making. Notice that leadership is not there. Okay. He then said communications, exchanging information and processing paperwork. Again, we saw that as one of the prime functions of a manager in another model that we looked at. He said human resource management is important. Motivating, discipline, managing, the conflict, staffing and training, all of those, again, we've looked at before in these models of what managers do. And the fourth one, socialize or networking, which includes socializing and politicking and interacting with others, being part of the social network of the organization. And what's interesting from Luthan's study of managerial activities is this. First of all, he defined strategic or effective managers as managers who did their jobs well. Effective managers are managers that reach their goals, consistently perform at or above expectations for their job. He defined successful managers as those individuals who were promoted faster than other managers. In other words, moved up the hierarchy quicker. Successful managers promoted quickly, moving up more rapidly than effective managers. Effective managers being more focused on accomplishing their goals and objectives and doing their jobs efficiently and effectively on a day-to-day basis without a lot of promotion. And what he found as he looked at these two things, and you can choose whether you'd like to be a successful or an effective manager, I think that is an individual choice, is that when he looked at this, what he found was that successful managers, remember those who move up more quickly, spent almost half of their time on networking. Those who were effective managers, got the job done, spent a good proportion of their time on communications. So you take this for what it's worth. There are different ways to get your job done as a manager. And we've now looked at 4 different models of what managers do. And I think this sets the base for us to go beyond this and begin talking about how managers go about doing their jobs and how they go about managing that all-important component of human capital. And those are some of the issues that we'll be investigating in the lectures that follow.